Margaret Thompson had lived in the small Midwestern town of Cedarville all her life. At 78, she found herself completely alone. Her husband, Harold, had passed away 10 years ago, leaving her in a house that once resonated with laughter, warmth, and shared memories. Their children, Laura and David, had grown up and moved to distant cities in the hopes of better jobs and opportunities. Margaret loved them dearly, but the distance made visits rare and phone calls often rushed. The house, once meticulously maintained, now showed signs of neglect. Paint peeled from the walls, the roof leaked during heavy rains, and the garden, which she had once tended with pride, was now an unkempt patch of weeds and dead plants. Every morning, Margaret awoke to silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside and the creaking of the old wooden floors. She had a strict routine. She would prepare breakfast, tidy the kitchen, and then sit by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the empty street. Some days she would attempt to read a book, but her mind often wandered to memories of Harold, their shared laughter and long evening walks down the neighborhood paths. Financial difficulties added another layer of misery to Margaret's life. She had worked part-time as a cashier at the local grocery store for decades, but retirement savings had been minimal. Social Security provided some income, but it barely covered rent, utilities, and her medications. Some nights, she had to choose between buying groceries and paying the heating bill. During harsh winters, she often bundled herself in layers of sweaters and blankets to survive the cold nights. One December evening, snow fell heavily outside, covering the sidewalks and rooftops. Margaret realized she would have to survive on canned soup for the rest of the week because her pharmacy bill had left her with barely anything. She sighed, her chest tight with the weight of yet another difficult day. Margaret's neighbors were kind but distant. She had once been active in the community, attending local fairs and helping organize church events. But as her mobility decreased, so did her social interactions. Sometimes children would run past her house, their laughter echoing through the street. Those sounds reminded her of her grandchildren, whom she rarely saw. Weekly phone calls to her daughter Laura were brief and often rushed. "I'll visit soon, Mom," Laura would promise, but the visits rarely happened. The short calls, however, became her lifeline, small moments that made her feel she still mattered. Even the little joys of life had become rare. The local library, her favorite escape, was now difficult to reach. Public transportation in Cedarville was limited, and long walks were painful for her aging legs and joints. Occasionally, she would manage to attend a community event at the senior center, but there, too, she often felt out of place. Most of the attendees were younger seniors, more active and sociable, and Margaret couldn't help but feel invisible among them. Despite the loneliness and hardships, Margaret clung to her routines. Every morning, she would make herself a simple breakfast of oatmeal or toast, and every evening she would light a small candle on the windowsill. The flickering light reminded her that, even in darkness, there was hope. On some evenings, she would sit on her porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl, staring at the streetlights illuminating the empty road. On one such evening, a stray cat wandered up to her feet, rubbing against her legs. She smiled, breaking a small piece of bread from her dinner and offering it. The cat purred, curling up beside her. In that moment, Margaret felt a fleeting sense of companionship and comfort, and a tiny bit of joy. Health issues added another layer to Margaret's struggles. Arthritis had made her hands stiff, and minor injuries took longer to heal. She had suffered from high blood pressure and mild diabetes for years, which required careful monitoring. Doctor's appointments were sometimes a challenge, and paying for medications was always a concern. Some nights, she lay awake worrying that a fall or sudden illness could leave her incapacitated with no one to help her. Despite these fears, Margaret was determined to maintain her independence, refusing to ask for help unless absolutely necessary. Margaret's past was a repository of both joy and sorrow. She remembered the early years of her marriage, the birth of her children, and countless holidays filled with laughter and love. She remembered dancing with Harold in the living room to the soft strains of old records, or walking hand in hand along the park trails, talking about their dreams. These memories, though bittersweet, provided her with a sense of continuity and purpose. Even when the world felt cold and indifferent, Margaret's memories warmed her heart. Isolation was perhaps the most painful aspect of Margaret's life. Days blurred into one another with only the hum of her refrigerator, the ticking of a clock, and occasional phone calls breaking the monotony. She often longed for human connection, someone to share a cup of tea with, someone to tell her small joys and troubles of the day. But she had learned to find contentment in small things: the warmth of sunlight on her face, the smell of rain through the cracked window, or the simple pleasure of listening to an old song on her record player. Despite the despair, Margaret was resilient. She had survived the Great Depression, raised children during turbulent times, and endured personal losses. Her strength came not from grand gestures, but from the quiet perseverance of daily life. She found small ways to bring purpose: writing letters to her grandchildren, tending what remained of her garden, or baking cookies for the neighbor kids. Each small action reinforced the idea that she still mattered, that her presence in the world had value. One particularly harsh winter, Margaret faced a series of power outages due to an ice storm. The house grew unbearably cold, and the heating system could not keep up. She layered herself in blankets and lit candles to keep warm. She spent hours reading by the dim light, praying that the storm would pass quickly. Despite the physical discomfort and fear, she maintained hope, reminding herself that storms, like hardships, eventually end. Margaret's story is a testament to the hidden struggles of many elderly women across the United States. In a society that often overlooks the elderly, she navigated life with dignity, courage, and perseverance. While her days were marked by loneliness and scarcity, they were also punctuated by moments of connection, kindness, and reflection. Whether it was a neighbor checking in, a stray cat seeking warmth, or a memory that brought tears and smiles simultaneously, Margaret's life demonstrated resilience in the face of relentless challenges. Even at 78, Margaret found reasons to smile. She cherished the letters from her grandchildren, the occasional visit from her daughter, and the fleeting interactions with neighbors. She discovered that hope could exist even in the quietest corners of life, and that small acts of courage and kindness could illuminate even the darkest days. Her story, while deeply personal, reflected a universal truth: that the human spirit, even when aged and weathered, has the capacity to endure, find meaning, and seek light amid shadows. Margaret would often whisper to herself at night, "I may be alone, but I am not forgotten." And as the candle flickered beside her window, its soft glow reminded her that even when life seemed unbearably lonely, hope remained, a light that could never be extinguished.